Welcome in to the NSFW Dynasty podcast. We are back, week 7 in the books. I'm your host, Dave Reed, joined by my co-hosts, Ryan Wilkinson and Joey Gallo.
What's going on, guys?
Man, I can't believe we're already heading to week 8 of the NFL season. The official for the fantasy regular season, most weeks you play till week 14. We're at the midpoint of the season. It's crazy to think we're halfway through. You start seeing which teams are looking like they're going to start selling for Dynasty, which teams are doubling down. We had a couple, actually 4 trades in our league, which we'll get into later. But yeah, now that's the midpoint, what we're going to run into later in this pod, we're going to kind of give a little reality check on the players that we've changed our opinions on throughout the season, but we'll get into that. But before, kind of want to run through some of the happenings that happened in week 7. No, it wasn't the bloodbath that was week 6 with like season-ending injuries, but there were some pretty significant injuries that happened. So, initial one, Deshaun Watson finally was cleared to play. Then he wasn't, and then he was, and then he decided not to play again. So he looked like he had a concussion potentially on a horrible throw before the concussion that should have been intercepted. He was cleared to play after concussion, but they went with P.J. Walker, and honestly, he just looks off, and he's already been ruled out for week 8. So that one's an ugly one. We got DK Metcalf was a late scratch due to his hip and I think like 2 or 3 other injuries potentially. But JSN did take advantage and got a score that week. Jalen Waddle had like back spasms. He was in and out literally the whole game. But he still got 6 for 63, but only had about 45% of the snaps. Christian Watson left with the knee. He should be okay, but he's always banged up, so something to kind of monitor. Barkley hyperextended his elbow for a bit, which terrified me because his arm was just dangling, but he was able to get back in and had a pretty big game. Eckler tweaked his ankle, played, but didn't look himself. Honestly, I'm starting to lower my expectations of what his output's going to be. Jerome Ford had a huge touchdown run to start the game, but ended up with a low-grade high ankle sprain, which is a weird thing to say, but he'll probably be out a couple weeks. Jalen Hurts hurt his knee. He said Ed was wearing a brace, but he should be okay. Godwin is dealing with a neck injury, but should be able to play this Thursday. Dawson Knox is going under wrist surgery and will be out for quite a bit. So it's Dalton Kincaid time. Wheels up for him. Luke Musgrave had an ankle injury. He may miss a week or 2. Ryan Tannehill has already been ruled out for week 8 coming out of the bye. So Malik Willis and potentially both Will Levis might be playing. We'll see how that goes. And Fields has already been ruled out for week 8. So Tyson Bagent, who got the win, he apparently was the Heisman of Division II football, whatever the name of that award is. But he got the win and looked pretty good. Yeah, a lot of minor injuries, some that are out a week or 2, but I don't know what are your guys' view or what are the biggest takeaways from these?
Yeah, I think just a couple that I'd highlight, the bigger names. So Jalen Hurts, wore a knee brace and was able to play the rest of the game, but it's definitely not something you want to see from one of the top quarterbacks. And then Barkley, like you said, looked like his arm was dangling, but He ended up going back in and playing and having a big game. So it seems like he's going to be okay there. And then the last one you touched on, I just think is interesting. Fields ruled out again. We're going to get to see Bagent again. And he looked pretty good. And he was kind of fun to watch, honestly. He was, seemed to be pretty into the game, was trying to pump up the crowd and whatnot when I saw him. So we'll see if he can pull off another win. And who knows what happens there. Fields has been great fantasy-wise, but hasn't been able to win in real life. And then,
the Division II quarterback comes in and does it. I think he's the only Division II quarterback in like the entire NFL.
Yeah, crazy. So that's an interesting one to keep an eye on too.
Yeah, I'm tempering my expectations on Bagent. I feel like his yards per attempt, yards per completion numbers were quite low, and Deonta Foreman really, really dominated.
Yes,
surprisingly.
He did. 3 touchdowns, baby.
The rushing game was really nice for Chicago, so we'll see what he can. We'll see. It'll be good to see him get a little bit of a stiffer test this upcoming weekend.
I think it was more though he was able to get them down the field to to the end zone
Mm-hmm.
for him to get it in there, So
they put up 30 points like that.
He was able
He's
to
taking every
drives.
snap. The ball's in his hand at some point. So I'll
Yeah.
give him credit for not losing the game.
Yeah, but I did see what you were talking about, Joe. I think it was like 17 yards was like either the longest pass or the average pass or something.
Yeah,
It was super longest pass, so it was super low.
And then Hurts is interesting. Like there was a play in that first half where he was running towards the sideline and it looked like he was limping, and I didn't know if I was kind of making it up in my head. Nobody said anything about it on the broadcast, and I'm just kind of like, is that the way he runs? And then he came out at halftime with the brace on. I mean, I'm sure they're not making a big deal of it, but for somebody who is constantly, like getting crushed up at the bottom of piles and how much of their offense relies upon his ability to move, it's probably something worth looking at. Eckler was concerning for me as well. I mean, he hobbled off pretty good after the tweak, and I was concerned he wasn't going to see the field again. So I was happy to see him back out there in the second half, but it was just like a weird game for the Chargers altogether. They just the whole second half of that game was weird. Like both offenses
like no scores.
Looked really good in the first half, and then
if you had the over, you must have been pissed. I don't even think it hit, but it was trending so nicely in the first half.
Yeah. And DK Metcalf sucked. I mean, I had him in my DraftKings lineup against you guys, and I also had him in my starting lineup in our league. And he's been limited at practice. It was kind of like one of those, like, I got lulled into a sense of security by the fact that, like, for 2 or 3 weeks now he's been limited in practice because he had that rib injury. And I didn't even bother paying any attention to it on game day because it was like, yeah, well, of course he's questionable because he's still nursing the rib. And then by the time he was ruled out, there was not much that could be done for either the DraftKings lineup or the NSFW lineup. So that was unfortunate, but it seems like he's trending towards being back this week. I saw the update on Sleeper right before we came on that his designation was updated to healthy. So hopefully he's good.
Yeah. And speaking of that DraftKings lineup, Harrison, who was on the pod last week, he had a very good showing. He ended up beating 2 of the 3 podcasters that we have here, but he could not take me down. I rode Kelsey's 12 catches for 179 yards and a touchdown to victory. I paid up for that guy, made it a point. First guy I was put in my lineup, and that was the difference maker for me. And as Joey mentioned, he did come in last. It doesn't help when you have one of your more expensive wide receivers just not play. So that was unfortunate. We also do this earlier in the week, and they're locked, so not really much you could have done there. So unfortunate, Joe. But
yeah, I mean, beyond Metcalf, right? Like, I'd be the first to admit if this was a horrific lineup. horrific
It
lineup.
was a low score.
Zach Evans was my
also was another
guy who also goosed, and Hollywood Brown.
I don't think he took a snap.
Didn't do much. No, he didn't. It just doesn't make any sense. And we'll talk about my thoughts on Darrell Henderson in a little bit, but he looks like so freaking slow and washed up, and yet he's getting all the carries. He's just like lumbering his way into the line,
straight off the couch.
Like, why is he out there? I just like it literally, I just have no patience for it at all. But the reality of the situation is, McVay said that Zach Evans is not he's not ready. He needs to spend more time learning the playbook, learning the blitz pickup schemes, and
honestly, I think Evans' career is already over. If you're getting Darrell Henderson coming off the bench to play ahead of you, you don't get a snap. That's not a good look.
Yeah.
It's not at all.
Yeah. So I mean, it was a bad lineup objectively, but we'll be back next time.
Yeah, it's all right. We'll do it again.
To avenge.
My lineup was actually decent, but I got a goose from Jameson Williams, which killed me.
Which will happen most times you start Jameson Williams because the guy cannot catch.
That one didn't work out. Hey, he had 6 targets, but he came down with 0 of 6. So
that's what I'm saying. He cannot catch. It doesn't matter. That was a bad game script the entire time. That's why I played Amon-Ra, and he had 100 catches in that game. Even Gibbs had a ton, but JMO. just
couldn't
blocked
get
for
it done.
hands. Guy stinks. But yeah, I mean, speaking of that, we can jump into Darrell Henderson and Royce Freeman. These guys, it was announced later in the week that like Zach Evans may not be the guy. It was like weird how it kind of came into it. It's like they were signing Royce, they may bring in Darrell Henderson, and it was, and you're like, oh, these are just depth guys that need them. Then it started to be like Evans doesn't seem like the lead back. He may be Henderson and Royce, and then like everyone's kind of like placing their bets which one they ended up, who's going to be a starter. Ended up being Henderson, but who had a solid game, not an effective game. He went 18 for 61 in a score. And Royce Freeman was actually a bit more effective, going 12 rushes for 66 yards. But both these guys look like potential starting options, but maybe not the prettiest. But who knows? McVay just loves his type of guys, and if you fit his system, he's just going to give you the ball.
Yeah, I was going to say this backfield has just been unbelievable. It literally started out the year where everyone was like, Cam Akers is the guy, like no doubt about it. Then Kyron Williams comes out of nowhere. He's the guy. He goes down. Zach Evans is the guy. And now it's like Royce Freeman's the guy. Then Darrell Henderson's the guy. It's crazy.
Yeah, and I can't help but to think they need explosiveness coming from somebody in the backfield, right? Like they signed Myles Gaskin.
Yeah, forgot about that.
He was inactive this past week, and like trying to be completely unbiased here, like removing myself from the fantasy world where I have Zach Evans all over the place. If you don't think that Evans is ready, then inactive him and get Myles Gaskin out there for like a change of pace, like receiving back, like some running back who looks like they aren't running with sand like bags tied to their ankles. Like
I think they probably will this week too. I think it's just Gaskin came in late, but Evans is clearly going to be a healthy script.
Yeah. I hope so, just so that I can like drop him from my lineups and move on. And also because I think I have Myles Gaskin in like 3 different dynasty leagues. So
unbiased spot here.
Truthfully, like get somebody out there who has any sort of burst whatsoever. These are like Darrell Henderson and Royce Freeman are the same guy, except Royce is 2 or 3, maybe not even 2 or 3, maybe 1 year younger, and they're the same back. They've had plenty of opportunity, and it's fine. Like they're just fine. They're not great, but they're fine. I mean,
it's kind of how I view Kyron. None of these guys are especially talented, but if McVay trusts you, the role is so valuable, you're gonna do well. And I'm not saying Kyron is as bad as them because he's younger, but I think the younger versions of Royce and Darrell are probably the same as Kyron.
I would agree with that. Yeah, that's the difference for sure.
Yeah.
Is, you have like probably most human running backs, with a few exceptions, have like 2 to 4 years of NFL legitimate burst. Even Saquon, like you can he has some burst, but he's got that like old guy lumbering burst by now.
Well, he also is like injured every play.
Yeah.
It just terrifies me. So he's back out there. But a couple other key players that in Dynasty you're probably keeping an eye on more. We had Rashee Rice starting to look good. It's a rookie. So like anytime you start seeing a rookie, special wide receiver tied to potentially a strong quarterback, start getting excited. So he's starting to really look nice. He went 5 for 60 and a touchdown. And they need someone to kind of step up in that wide receiver group. I
think that's the thing with him, right? We've been talking all season that there's no receivers there and someone needs to step up, and whoever steps up there is going to obviously have a super valuable role behind Kelsey. So if he's now the guy, that's huge value there.
And he has burst too. So like if he starts gaining more trust, he can definitely do some special things there. You had you had the Ravens offense just explode. They looked great. It was an unfortunate play against Lamar in one of my other leagues where I had also Deontay who dominated, and it didn't matter. I lost by a point because Lamar went crazy, threw for 357 and 3 touchdowns and ran for another 36 in a score. Andrews had 2 touchdowns. Like everything they were doing was working. There was one play where I think Lamar ran around for like 10 seconds before throwing a touchdown. It was the most ridiculous thing, something only he could do. And it was like a statement game against the Lions, who everyone has been kind of hyping up. So that was a kind of an interesting game to see. You saw Josh Palmer. So stepping up for the Chargers. He did his best Keenan act. He went 5 for 133. And this, again, is another depth wide receiver most people probably had on their benches coming into the Dynasty season, and now you got yourself a pretty solid wide receiver flex option. And then the Monday night game, Kirk Cousins, primetime Kirk Cousins, is a new version of himself. Granted, some of these passes looked real bad. He should have had another pick that turned into a touchdown because Addison ripped it from him. But big night for him. But overall, like, you saw a huge game from Addison, who had 7 for 123, 2 touchdowns. TJ Hawkinson was just a reception machine, 11 for 86. And you even saw a guy who was in waivers earlier this season, and Brandon Powell, get some good looks. He went 4 for 86 and could be a pretty involved weapon going forward until JJ is back. And finally, the Giants did get their win. Defense looks legit, and Waller finally had a huge game. So it's good to see across the board. But any other takeaways from these games?
The one other team that just like continues to defy the odds, and every single week, I just like can't. I still can't wrap my head around the fact that the Atlanta Falcons are have a winning record. They're constantly in these games, and I don't know if it's a reflection of the fact that their schedule has been maybe a little on the soft side, and they've only been facing, like this past week it was Tampa Bay and Washington, and before that the Texans and the Jaguars and the Lions and the Packers and the Panthers. That's like, honestly, the Lions maybe are the only above average team they faced the entire season. But, like, it's just every single week I'm always finding them in games. And I'm also just frustrated by the fact that it almost seems like Arthur Smith's approach of not using his best players it like just works, It's like very frustrating because you want Bijan Robinson to touch the ball more. You want Kyle Pitts to be more involved. And yet at the same time, he's not involving them and they're winning. So I understand they have an above average defense, but that they just continue to be, from like a fantasy perspective, just a real enigma and a frustration for me trying to anticipate who on their offense is reliable to do anything when every single one of their games is the same script. It's like a game played within like the 10 to 21 point range. And, you can almost guarantee that when we reach the witching hour, Atlanta's either going to be up or down, 4 points, 3 points, 16-3, 14-10. And there's a bunch of turnovers involved. I feel like it's the same game every week. But
witching hour is basically just you're watching the Falcons game.
I digress.
It goes right into it.
It's just becoming frustrating, and hopefully it'll be nice to see them. They play Tennessee this week, but then after that, they might have the easiest schedule in the entire league.
They are very potentially a playoff team, which is gonna, like, that. To your point, like, it's just validating Arthur Smith's game plan. People can criticize it all much. It's like, I'm winning. Like, what are you going to do about it? And that means it's more and more likely that potentially Ritter is a quarterback again because they're not drafting one. And I think we spoke about that a week or two ago. But their record's too good to draft a quarterback.
It's wild. They're favored in all but one.
They're not a bad team. They're just annoying for fantasy.
The rest of the season, they're favored.
That's the thing. They actually have talent. Like, we've talked about their players a lot. Yeah. But like Joe said, it's you don't know who's going to hit every week because
as a Giant fan, do you know how jealous I am of this talent? I wish we had that talent.
They have a lot of talent. It's just they don't use it in a way where it's dynamic and flashy and attractive from a fantasy perspective. It's like,
I honestly feel like Arthur Smith gets mad most times the GM drafts another talented player. He's like, come on, I just want offensive linemen and just running it. And then they gave him a running back. He's like, no, that guy's too talented. I want the 4th rounder who's just really big in Algier.
Stinks.
I know. But with that being said, we're going to move to our next segment. We're going to break down, as I mentioned, halfway through the fantasy regular season. You go to each season with a lot of expectations of what you think players are going to be and storylines you make up in your head and what you want to buy into. And at this point, some of those came to fruition, but some of them don't. You kind of have to do a reality check on yourself. You got to stay water. You can't be stuck in your way of thinking. That's where you end up losing value on players or missing out. So you have to start changing your views on these players based on the facts and the stats that you have in front of you. So with that, we're each going to go through a player at each of the key positions, and I'll talk about a player that we've changed our opinion on, whether it be for the good or for the worse. Their situation change, just their play is better than what we thought it was. They're not being used in a certain way, or maybe we just evaluated the talent wrong. But with that, going to jump in, and Ryan, you have an interesting one. I think will get people very riled up for quarterback first. Why don't you start off?
Yeah, definitely a bit of a controversial one, I'm sure. And before we even get to it, I'm not saying that this guy is bad by any means, but I do think this season has to be talked about. And I went with Joe Burrow in a negative way, and I don't even know if I have one thing to point to in terms of a situation or anything that has really changed other than I guess his injury. But he sat out most of August, and people still drafted him as a top 5 QB, top 7 probably at worst. And if you got him as like the 6th or 7th quarterback, you were probably pretty pumped. And if someone told you prior to the season he was going to suit up week 1 and play 100% of every game through 7 weeks, you'd be expecting top 5 fantasy season. And he's currently the QB 26 on the season. Only 32 teams. Now, he did have a bye in week 7, so that's part of the reason. But even if you look at it on points per game, he's only averaging 14 points per game that he's played in. Doesn't sound terrible, but it's in the same range as Deshaun Watson, Jimmy Garoppolo, Kenny Pickett, Bryce Young, Derek Carr, and Mac Jones.
Oh, no.
Mac Jones, who we've talked about many times, he's had 2 negative fantasy weeks. And I think one that was like a 0 or a 1 point week. He only is averaging 1 point less than Joe Burrow on the season.
Yikes.
So, he just had a bye, comes back in week 8. Week 6, though, he only had 185 passing yards. So I just got to throw it out there. Like, is there any concern for you guys that he's not this top 5 option that we thought he was? How long do you blame the injury? Does he get a pass this whole season? Or if he comes back from the bye and he's still putting up mediocre numbers, are you worried?
Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, I mean, I will say if it still lingers beyond the bye, then I'm concerned. The beginning of the season, especially a lot of those like low point scores he had were the first few weeks of the year, and it was bad. And it looked like I think he did have a setback, so it was like really bad. The one good game was against the Cards, but like you hope then he had the week after the game he had the bye week off, get rested, get right. If it's not, he's not going to get healthier this year unless they like make him sit a week or two. So I'm optimistic he's going to be better going forward, and I'm believing it, but I wouldn't say it's a lot. I wouldn't say I'm not nervous. I'm very interested to see how he does this week. I don't think it's talent. Like, it's not talent, it's not weapons. It's literally just the injury. But that being said, like for this year, if this is an injury that's going to last the whole year, then you have to change your expectations for what you're going to get out of him.
Yeah, that's how I feel too. I think for the answer is different for me. Like from a redraft or this season perspective, my worry on a scale of 1 to 10 is maybe 6 or 6.5. And a couple
Pump it
weeks
up
ago,
to a 7.
for a couple weeks ago, it would have been higher. But the mobility during the Arizona game, his ability to throw the ball downfield in the Arizona game, like I guess if we're not questioning the talent, I'm certainly not questioning the talent from a dynasty standpoint. My worry is a 0. I have no concerns at all. So, if it's just a matter of him getting back up to game speed, getting comfortable, getting his legs back under him, getting through the injury, I think what I saw week 5 gave me enough confidence to say that I'm expecting him to come out. I mean, the matchup against San Francisco is absolutely brutal this week, but and their schedule, like it doesn't do them favors after that, right? It's like San Francisco, Buffalo
after that,
at Baltimore. So I'm not necessarily saying that he's a trade for, especially in redraft, but
I would in Dynasty
Yeah,
potentially.
I think we'll see a lot more of the true Joe Burrow from this point forward. I think the injury was really screwing him up, and hopefully, uh, hopefully, I love watching him play, and I haven't been a
No one's
couple
got more
weeks.
swag.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So,
Guy's
Yeah,
great.
you definitely hope it's the injury, and hopefully, this bye week he comes back and is himself. But just had to throw it out there.
Yeah, no, it's a good point, and it's I mean, Joe and I in a different dynasty league did buy him. Not super cheap, but we got like we needed a running back, so we got Burrow and Cook for basically Lamar. Which in that league, the way the passing scoring works, Burrow actually scores just as much, if not more, than Lamar most weeks. But uh, it, it wasn't without concern. We had at the time a healthy Anthony Richardson, so we felt better at the time. Then immediately he goes down. But anyway, moving forward to a positive view for me, I'll jump in. Is Baker Mayfield? I've changed my opinion on him in a very positive way. Going into the season, I wasn't even sure Baker was going to be starting for the Bucs. We saw all those hilarious camp battle videos of him and Trask just straight up missing wide open wide receivers. And I was viewing Baker in like a startup draft of like QB 28 to 34 range, and which in like Dynasty Super Flex, you're just snagging this guy because you're afraid of not having a third quarterback. That's the only reason you're grabbing them, and you're fully expecting that they probably lose their job mid-season. Um, and I was so down on Baker that I was like down on all the position players, like Mike Evans, who is another player who has looked a lot better, but partially because Baker has been pretty competent. Um, and like honestly, right now, no one is mistaking Baker for someone who's going to fulfill that first overall NFL draft pick expectations. But at the age 28, he's seemingly trying to figuring it out to be a competent quarterback, and someone I'm totally fine with now rolling out as my QB2. He's basically what you were hoping Derek Carr or Geno Smith were going to be for your team. And he hasn't just helped in dynasty and fantasy. He's also helped the Bucs be a pretty competitive team. They're sitting at 3-3 and could push for the division title. He is going to be a free agent at the end of the season, so you don't really know what his status is going to be beyond this. So that's a little bit in doubt. But honestly, if he keeps playing this way the rest of the year, there's going to be a team that gives him another contract and gives him a shot, especially if they make the playoffs. So uh, obviously, no, this is someone you didn't like have a full confidence that you were going to be able to start beyond week 10. And now I'm like, this is a great depth piece. If I have him as QB2, I feel pretty good. And he potentially will even be playing next year. So changed my outlook on good old Baker.
Yeah, and for him, maybe it's even situation, right? He's bounced around a bit. He was on the Browns and the Rams. Now he's on the Bucks, and maybe he finally figures it out on the Bucks. And maybe part of his issue was just the other teams that he was on a little bit. But yeah, we've talked about him a couple times on here. I think his value has gone way up compared to what you thought it was before the season. So it's been pretty fun to watch.
Yeah, and it's funny that you mention that he's basically what you hoped you were getting with Derek Carr, because Derek Carr is actually my pick here for who I've changed my opinion on from the start of the season at the quarterback position. Um, it's been disgusting to watch. Like there, I think
Yep.
that there are, and it's so surprising because throughout his entire career with the Raiders, Oakland Vegas Raiders, anytime their offense was out there, like they were dynamic, they were downfield threat. He was a great deep ball thrower. He like there was just like a lot of pizzazz to the Raiders offense with Derek Carr leading it. And now with the Saints, it almost seems like he's become maybe the most volume dependent quarterback in the entire league. Two QB1 performances on the season. They happen to come in the last 2 weeks, and they happen to come on the back of 55 and 50 pass attempt games. Only one time this season has had multiple touchdown passes, and that was in week 5 at New England. Twice he has 0 touchdown passes, and unfortunately, it's affecting the Saints' offense And it's also affecting the value of Chris Olave, who is a dynamic downfield receiver. And it just feels like Carr is not able to utilize Olave in a way that he was able to be utilized in his rookie season, which is tough because you thought when Carr was coming in that it was going to be an upgrade, right? Like going in the whole offseason. I mean, I was grabbing Carr, as like a late round dart throw and redraft and kind of hoping, he could be a guy that you could throw out there as an every week starter, given the weapons that they have in New Orleans, but hasn't worked out. And, I think we're going to talk a little bit about Alvin Kamara later, but it's a perfect example. Kamara's usefulness or utility and how great he's been is just a reflection of the fact that he's just Derek Carr has become like a dump off machine, and he's checking it down to Kamara at an absolutely alarming rate. So tough to watch.
Yep.
QB1 2 out of 7 weeks on a team that's constantly in a negative game script. Just not what you want.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to throw downfield to Olave when you're checking down to Kamara 20 times a game, which is absolutely crazy. But I think that's a good segue to Ryan. Let's get into the running backs.
Yeah, I was going to say that my first comment is the 2 QB1 performances that Carr had that Joe mentioned. They still only resulted in 11 and 13 fantasy points. So it's definitely been very brutal for him. But yeah, speaking of, running backs, I did go with Kamara as my, good sort of positive change in outlook. Obviously, he had the 3-week suspension, but I feel like there wasn't a ton of talk about him preseason. He's 28, so I think that combined with the suspension left a lot of people questioning if he would still be a top fantasy running back. And all he's done is rip off 15, 17, 14, and 23 points since returning. He's already the RB19 on the season, and that's with 0 points the first 3 weeks. He looks really good still, and he's getting a full workload. Like Joe mentioned, he's getting a ton of check down from cars. He had 14 targets last week, caught 12 of them. So, 12 catches for 91 yards from a running back is pretty sweet in fantasy. And
he's probably one of the target leaders in the NFL over the past 4 weeks.
Yeah, crazy. Literally, yeah, he has, let's see, 14, 8, 3, and 14. So, 14 target games. But, people were also talking a lot about the rookie Miller taking over or Jamal Williams stealing some touchdowns, but neither of those has happened since, Kamara's come back. And on a points per game basis, since he's returned, he's RB7. So, for where he was drafted, especially in redraft, you got a lot of value there if you didn't care about the suspension.
And he looks good too, quite the opposite of Carr, who looks like something's wrong, right? Like Kamara looks like he has more burst than he did last year. I know there was some weird stuff going on with the injury that he had last year, and there was more confidence going into this season that maybe he would be his old self, and that's kind of how he looked. He looks explosive. He's making guys miss again. He's fun to watch. So I've loved everything I've seen from Kamara.
Yeah, I mean, when you can dump it down to him for a 3-yard pass, you gotta do it. That's what Carr's been talking.
Yeah. 14 times a game.
But Joe, why don't you jump into someone who doesn't really catch that many passes, but at least not as much as Kamara.
Catches 0 passes. It's actually the polar opposite. So I'm going with Brian Robinson, and my opinion of Brian Robinson, it's kind of been like an absolute roller coaster because I was so out on him in the offseason. I mean, I don't think I drafted him in one mock, in one actual draft, redraft, dynasty start. I just was out because I just didn't necessarily see a path to that type of running back in this offense with Antonio Gibson getting a lot of hype and with Chris Rodriguez and other running backs there in the room. And I just kind of felt and then he came out week 1 and week 2 and rips off, gets 19 carries week 1, gets 18 carries week 2, gets 2 touchdowns week 2. And he's one of the top running backs on the season through 2 weeks. And he's managed to stay within the top 10. I think he's running back 10 on the season still as of right now. Yet the last 4 weeks he's played 50, 35, 50, 35% of snaps. He's actually ceding early down carries to Chris Rodriguez at this point. I think Chris Rodriguez got maybe 5 and 7 carries the last 2 weeks. He's on the field more. And Robinson's never on the field during third down and passing downs. Antonio Gibson has that role pretty much locked down. So just mentioning Brian Robinson here because I feel like I was out and then I had regret and I'm like, how did I not take this guy anywhere? And now I'm back out. I think that they're already one of the highest Washington pass volume teams in the entire league, and he's a very deceiving RB10 on the season who, if he's your RB1 or RB2 right now, you're probably in bad shape. And I don't know that I would even have full confidence flexing him, honestly, at this point. So it's been a roller coaster, but not great vibes for B Rob right now.
Yeah, I had the same roller coaster ride you had. I was a Gibson guy also. He's not good as well. Just that they don't have a run game is what's going on in Washington.
Yeah.
But after those first couple weeks, I was like, I got to trade for this guy. Like, this guy's going to be like as a solid RB2. Maybe you can get him cheap. Wasn't able to, and thank God I was not able to because I am out again on him. I don't want anyone in that rushing offense.
Yep.
Yeah, like you said, it just doesn't look good there. I had Gibson in a different league and dropped him because you can't start anyone there pretty much.
I mean, Gibson, I think there were games he only had receptions. Like, I don't think Gibson's getting rushing attempts. So that offense is just not what you want from a rush. It's a weird offense overall, for being honest.
Super hot and cold.
Yeah.
One week they look incredible. Same thing with Sam Howell. 1 week he's great, and the next week you're like, is he even going to start next game?
It's a Giants day is looking legit. I'm gonna give that the wink. But I'm gonna also jump in with another unfortunate opinion change into the negative with a B Robinson, but with Bijan, which first of all, don't hear what I'm not saying. I am not saying Bijan is bad, but I had him personally as a lock for the top 5 at the running back position, expecting a super high floor with a massive ceiling, assuming he's going to get a crazy workload. And if you've had him this year, which I do have him in a Dynasty league, you're disappointed. He is the RB13, but he has no finishes above the RB8, which was back in week 2. He has no weeks with over 20 points yet. A-Chan, who has missed 3 games so far, still has 18 more points than Bijan has on the season. So just putting that in perspective there. And when you watch Bijan play, like you realize this is not due to the lack of talent. The guy is incredible. The issue boils down to me to 2 major points. First point, he isn't the only show in town for some reason. Algier is getting a healthy workload, often getting double-digit touches every week. And now Cordell Patterson is back. And although he's not an elite talent, he's going to get some touches and steal a couple from Bijan. It's just Arthur Smith loves using him. But you'd be like, all right, he's sharing touches. It's Arthur Smith's run first offense. There'll still be plenty of work, but that's not the case so far. Ritter's actually thrown way more passes than anyone expected. Since week 2, Ritter's averaging 35 pass attempts, and he's actually running a little bit too, especially near the goal line where he's vulturing touchdowns. He's had 3 touchdown rushes in, which as a Bijan owner, you're getting really frustrated because guess how many touchdowns Bijan has on the ground? 0. It's crazy. So he's still getting a healthy workload. He's in the pass game. He's getting a good amount of reception. So he's still in RB1 for fantasy. And someone in Dynasty I still view as a very high-end asset. But my expectations going forward have to change for him. His floor is lower than I thought it was. You're thinking more 10-point range going forward. And his ceiling for blow-up games may just not be there. At this point, I much prefer in both redraft and Dynasty to have Breece over Bijan, which going into the season seemed crazy to me. But Breece at least has the ability to have those blow-up games and a decent floor where I don't see the same ceiling for Bijan. But it might be hot takey, but what do you guys think? And I know, Joe, in our league, you have Bijan as well.
Yeah, I mean, My thoughts are on the Atlanta offense is well documented.
Yeah, I was gonna say we just
Rewind a
talked
little.
about it.
But
Yeah,
truthfully, that this is a lot of the genesis of those feelings. It's just the fact that he is maybe the best pure running back in the league right now, and he's got the tank of young legs and burst is as full as it's ever going to be, and it's not like you can preserve that. Like it depletes with age, right? So all they're doing is just like wasting valuable time of his primest of primes. So I hope that it changes, and it's unfortunate because it may not, as long as they continue to win. But until then, I'll just be hoping that they lose every week until they start to give Bijan Robinson the ball more frequently.
yeah, and you got to hope last week was an outlier where he really was sick or
Oh,
whatever
yeah.
they're saying he was. But yeah, I mean, Cordell Patterson got 10 rushing attempts last week, which
It's on the field a ton.
it's just unbelievable when you have Robinson and Algier. So yeah, it's like we talked about. It's just kind of a crapshoot over there on who you want to start for fantasy purposes.
Yeah, that leaves a bad taste in my mouth. So I'm going to wash it out. I'm going to get a good one here, a little positive vibes going. So we're going to move to the wide receiver range, and I'm going to jump in first with the number one option in the Jacksonville passing game, Christian Kirk. Yeah, I didn't think I'd be saying that, especially after week one, where he played only 60% of snaps with 3 targets and 1 catch. But since then, he has been undoubtedly the primary target for Trevor Lawrence. And I think it's time we start readjusting our view of this team's pecking order. Now, Kirk hasn't really blown you away in any weeks, but he's been so damn consistent every single week, providing you exactly what you want out of wide receiver 2 flex. Since week 2, he has scored between 11 and 18 points every single week. I have absolutely no shares of Christian Kirk anywhere because I was expecting him to be maybe the 4th or 5th option, and now I'm seeing that was a huge, huge mistake. Say that for
I've made a huge mistake.
Yes, huge mistake there, guys. The way this team is being run right now, first it's run with ETN. That's the first option. But then it's after that, it's second, it's target Kirk. Third, it's target Engram, which I'm sure we'll get into. And then fourth, it's target Ridley. And Christian Kirk, he's only 27, and he's getting paid like a wide receiver 1 for also the next 2 seasons as well. And his dead cap is so high that he will not be cut. But he's performing like a wide receiver 1 for this team as well. So you can expect Kirk to not just be good this season, but to be tied to Trevor Lawrence for the next couple of years as well. So this is someone, redraft and dynasty, I think is a very solid asset.
Yeah, it's definitely changed for the better for him. Obviously, everyone was talking about Ridley going into the season and how he was going to have this massive, massive year. But, Kirk seems here to stay. The only other little tidbit that I'll add is that Zay Jones played week 1, which was when Kirk, had his worst week, and he's basically been injured since and should be coming back soon. Maybe that changes things a little bit. But like you said, right now he seems to be ahead of Ridley and Engram, and you would assume Zay Jones. So he's the number 1 target for Trevor Lawrence right now.
Yeah, I mean, we should have known, right? Like, it's one of those things where it's just like, as a community, I think we kind of just like overthought it a little bit and was like, yeah, Ridley,
He was great last year.
He had success the last time he was on the field, like two fucking years ago, and Kirk was very solid last year, and even in the playoffs, right? 2 playoff games, he had 14 targets and a touchdown in each of the 2 playoff games. So, like, the last time he was on the field, but going into the season, he was the number 1 receiver, and we all just kind of like just forgot about him heading into this season. And it's like all of a sudden week 2 is like, oh yeah, Christian Kirk's the number 1 receiver again.
I know, and I feel like the preseason led into, because they were saying Zay Jones was the outside guy and Kirk was going to play slot, but they do 12 personnel a lot where there's 2 tight ends and the slot guys off the field. So if you want a guy who gets in the slot but isn't only a slot wide receiver, you want someone who runs like a flanker route, and it seemed like after week 1, Kirk was only playing slot. So that's why we're like, he's done. Like, he's only going to be half field. But I don't see how he's not involved more now. Like, I feel like Zay Jones, like, no matter what, like, Zay Jones will be off the field over Christian Kirk. You're leaving Kirk on that field.
To think so, but
Yeah, we'll see now. We'll see. I
Even
think
as a Kirk owner in a lot of leagues last year,
I had him everywhere last year.
Zay Jones scored a lot of touchdowns last year. I'm actually going to pop it open right now. Towards the end of the year, he had a 3-touchdown game towards the end of last year.
Zay Jones is very underrated. He's
Yeah.
like 28, I think, as well. He's a late bloomer, but he had, I think, a really nice touchdown for the Jags only a couple weeks ago as well.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Well, let's keep the positive vibes going because I know the bad one I'm going to have some explaining to do. So Joe, why don't you jump in first?
Yeah, so I'm going to go with Puka Nacua for mine. So Puka is currently the wide receiver 4 on the season. And he has the same number of touchdowns as he does weeks outside the top 12 wide receivers, which is an incredible statistic, being number 4 wide receiver on the season, 2 touchdowns, 2 weeks outside the top 12. And why I'm choosing to mention him here because after week 1, he burst onto the scene, and it felt a little bit out of necessity, right? He had, an unbelievable amount of targets and receptions and yards for a rookie in the first game, week 1. Kind of felt like a flash in the pan. I wasn't that in. I didn't put in any fab really anywhere that would have resulted in me acquiring him after such a performance week 1. And the reality is that he basically continues to demand double-digit targets throughout the entire season. He's a really strong receiver. He's always open. He's big.
Always.
He catches the ball. Like, he's got good hands. And even now with Cooper Kupp back, right, like, I felt good. I even said on the pod last week about Kupp coming in week 1. Kind of felt like, Tutu Atwell was the odd man out. And I still think he is, right? I still think it's Kupp and Nacua as like the 1A and 1B here. But Nacua had 140 something yards and another 13 or 14 targets last week in a negative game script. And Kupp was like 4 for 30 and change, or 5 for 40. So, he's not touchdown dependent, which is incredible at the wide receiver position. And if the positive touchdown regression does start to come, he might finish the season as a top 5 wide receiver. So you're real happy with him, and definitely somebody who I feel like after week 1, I was not super confident was going to be able to sustain, and he's definitely sustained.
Yeah, and like you said, when Kupp came back, you thought he'd see, less, but he really hasn't. I guess to flip it, are you at all concerned about Kupp now that Puka has kind of established himself there? Kupp had a down game last week, and like you said, Puka had 12 targets.
So I am in Dynasty. I would be concerned with Kupp. I think if I wasn't a contender this year, I'd probably be looking to sell because he's 30 years old and he has an injury history, and we don't really know what the quarterback situation for the Rams is going to be like beyond this year, really. I mean, maybe we get another year of Matt Stafford. I feel like any additional years of Matt Stafford at this point are like a gift to Rams Dynasty fantasy football players. So yeah, I mean, I'm not incredibly concerned about Kupp for this season. I was frustrated last week by the usage because I had a Kupp anytime score or touchdown bet, and it just seems like you could run that in and out route that they kind of run with Kupp, where he's the outside wide receiver and they're on the 1 or 2 yard line, and he starts in and then kind of zags right out towards the pylon, and Stafford's got the timing down with him perfectly, and he catches it with it works every time. Every time it works. He probably caught that exact pass for a touchdown like 16 times for a touchdown last year alone. They did it for the 2-point it's just they could run that play every time. So just I think that they will down once the game they're a playoff contending team. Hopefully they'll stay a playoff contending team, and I wouldn't necessarily be super worried about Kupp. But if I had him in Dynasty and I wasn't contending, I'd probably look to just get what I can.
Yeah, I have no concerns at all. It's just pure age with Kupp, which That's any player, no matter what anytime you start seeing a player get near 30, you're like, oh, I got to get rid of this guy. But if you're a contending team, it's like, I'm riding this to the ground. And yeah, Cup's still a wide receiver one, but I think both can coexist. Stafford's done it before. I mean, it's been Cup and Robert Woods in the past, and it seems like Puka is taking that Robert Woods role. So I think they both can coexist, and I'd be excited to have both on my team.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I think it's a 1A, 1B situation, and they should both be very playable going forward. But flipping the script to someone who I think we've soured on a little bit, Jerry Jeudy. And I know, Dave, you just traded for him, so we'll get your thoughts. But first, let's throw a few facts out. He's wide receiver 55 on the season, 57 on a points per game basis. His best week was 10 points. He has 0 touchdowns. You could blame it on Russell Wilson, but Sutton has 5 touchdowns on the season as the wide receiver 20. I just think Jerry Jeudy is one of those guys that everyone's kind of high on year after year, but then he never performs, but it's always kind of blamed on something, almost like a DJ Moore, like a Calvin Ridley, where, there's just always this hype, but it never happens. And then, next year he'll have the hype and it may not happen, but I just don't think he's going to turn into a top 15 wide receiver option or anywhere near that, even if he gets traded. So I'm out on him now, but let's hear your thoughts, Dave.
Right. That is exactly what I hope happens, is that people still believe the hype. And that is what that's what I acquired. I hate Jerry Jeudy. I think he stinks. I've been saying that. I've been out on Jerry Jeudy for so long. Even in a different redraft league with Joe, I ended up drafting him with one of my last picks in that draft because I know people do believe in him and I don't. And to me, that is like it's very easy to trade away someone you don't believe in and someone else can buy into. So you just, even if it's like a sweetener, like I'll go in, like I don't feel like I'm losing much, but it gets a deal done. So that's what I'm hoping to get. And for me, and we can get into the trade in more detail a little bit later, but I needed more youth in the wide receiver room. I have a lot of older guys. I do have a couple of rookies, but I didn't have too many younger wide receivers. So I need some youth there. And I gave up a lot of older assets that are definitely better than Jeudy this year, in my opinion, but probably don't have too much value beyond this year. And after this year ends, they probably will have 0 trade value. So I'm like, all right, if I can get Jeudy some youth, if he starts turning it around, get people buying into that hype again, I can flip him for something. So that was my whole motivation for that trade.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's pretty accurate in what, has to happen, because it just doesn't look good. And, I don't think he's going to be a good option going forward. But like I said, he has that hype year after year for some reason. I don't know why.
Always believers in him. He's, I don't know. He'll have like 1 or 2 good games, and that's when I'm selling him. I just can't wait. Just waiting.
He might be waiting a while.
I know. No, he'll have 1 or 2. Whenever there's a broken coverage, he'll beat them, and then people think that he's like an amazing route runner. It's like, no, the defense just stuck there.
You might be waiting until he's on a different team, because his quarterback right now absolutely stinks on ice. So
yeah, I think his coaching hates him too. Like, I can't believe the past 2 games he's had 10 targets for 5 catches and 40 yards. Like, I don't even know how he's doing. Like, are they only throwing at the line of scrimmage with him? It's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So. You know what? Let's get the last bad one out of the way. It's with me, and then we'll finish on a couple good notes. So moving to the tight end. First, I'm just also going to throw it out there. Tight end is an utter crapshoot, especially in Dynasty. It's such a hard position to predict outside of the top 7 or 8 at the position. But there was this second-year tight end, Chig Okonkwo, that the Dynasty community was absolutely enamored with, including myself. There was just so much hype for this guy as a player who's going to ascend into the top 10 at the position. Although some cold water got thrown on that when the Tennessee Titans signed DeAndre Hopkins, because a big aspect of that was the fact that there were so many available targets up for grabs, and that is no longer really the case. But the other part you were excited about with Chig was that you saw in his rookie season, He was so explosive with the ball and yards after the catch, getting these massive chunk plays. Last year, Chig was averaging his yards per target of 9.78 yards and 14.06 yards per catch. But this year, those numbers have been effectively cut in half. He has had 4.9 yards per target and 7.17 yards per catch. So if you're only getting about 4 targets a game, and with those few opportunities, you need to have big chunk plays to get fantasy points. And he's not getting that right now. He's having shorter passes and he's not breaking free for yards after catch. So he's just simply not a starting option anymore. He is currently the tight end 35 on the year, which is just useless, even in a tight end premium league like we are in right now. And now Ryan Tannehill is hurt, and you're going to have the likes of Will Levis or Malik Willis thrown to him for the foreseeable future. It is not going to get better. So, although I do love his athletic profile, I need to focus my attention elsewhere at the tight end position. Sad.
Yeah, no, he just hasn't had the usage, like you said, and
his name was just so fun to say too. If he was good, come on,
and
chicka.
You know, like Hopkins signing hurt, but honestly, like, is anybody in that passing offense producing anything? I mean, Traylon Burke's been hurt too, but like
just hurt the whole time. He's back now. He's healthy.
Ryan Tannehill has looked washed up, and I think that's partially contributing to Chig's underperformance this year for sure.
Yeah, that whole team, the offensive side at least, is just disastrous. But let's really turn around to a solid rookie. Rydogs, why don't you jump in here?
Yeah, so someone I think people were pretty high on before the season, but now you're way, way higher on is Sam Laporta. You know, got to be almost considered the steal of the rookie draft. He was taken in the late second round in our draft, but probably slipped to the third round in some drafts. And he's currently the tight end 4 on the season already as a rookie. He's looked good. And honestly, the fact that he's performing so well on a team that it turns out is actually loaded with fantasy relevant players, the Detroit Lions, who would have thought? But, you know, you got Goff, Montgomery, Gibbs, St. Brown, even Josh Reynolds has become fantasy relevant. It's pretty encouraging. And, you know, long-term view right now, he's the number 2 dynasty ranked tight end, but he's literally one spot behind Travis Kelce because of Kelce's age. So he's likely going to be the number 1 tight end dynasty asset, real soon. Already kind of pushing for it. So that's a huge sort of turn of events from the beginning of the season, and someone that everyone's high on now.
And historically, rookie tight ends do not show up. He is shattering the record books for rookie tight ends. So easily could be, I mean, he's got to be considered a top 3-4 dynasty tight end already. Like, he is just dominating.
With the hype and the new shiny toy situation, I wouldn't be surprised if he was like the first or the second guy off the board from a tight end perspective in dynasty startups this offseason.
Yeah, because Kelsey's a year older. Andrews still up there, but like after Andrews and Kelsey, like you got Hawkinson's in the mix and Laporta. Like I think that's like the top 4. I don't think there's anyone else in consideration there.
Yeah.
But one other guy who's pretty he's in probably that next tier in the tight end position. Is someone Joey's going to speak to.
Yeah, so not flashy. My opinion on this person has, again, been a bit of a roller coaster even throughout his entire career, because he started off his career with the Giants and absolutely was about as unreliable as they get at the tight end position for
you could
the
not
G-men.
be more excited to get rid of him.
But Evan Ingram, and I'm mentioning Evan Ingram here because he's very, I guess, under the radar, if you will. And, you know, like a lot of people view the tight end position as touchdown dependent, right? Like most tight ends aren't getting a lot of volume. So if you can get the guy who gets the touchdown, then you're probably going to have a tight end 1 on the week, probably somewhere from tight end 3 to 7 or 8, right? Like if your guy scores. Evan Ingram has not scored one single touchdown this entire season, and he's still the tight end 7. Ahead of guys like George Kittle, who has scored 3 times. He's had 4 weeks as a tight end 1. 2 as a high end tight end 2, right? So he finished as tight end 14 2 different times. So basically, he's a tight end 1 every week, and he still hasn't scored a touchdown. So he's basically a lock to produce, like Dave said earlier. He's basically Trevor Lawrence's second read on just about every passing play.
Mm-hmm.
And if the touchdown dependency, if the touchdown variance actually starts to tilt in his direction, and he scores 2 or 3 or 4 times over the rest of the season, you're looking at potentially a top 3 or 4 guy. So I definitely am higher on Evan Ingram than I was previously, and probably somebody who, like, if you don't have one of the elite guys at tight end, like I would confidently say like that your absolute best option at tight end, because for sure that you're going to get some output and you're not going to just get crapped. So
Yeah.
Evan Ingram.
It's like you said, he has 7 or 8 targets every single game except week 1, which he had 5 targets. So if you're getting 7 or 8 targets from your tight end every single week, guaranteed, that's pretty valuable.
That's huge. Yeah, you're getting goosed a lot. Like even Kittle gooses you a ton.
Yeah.
I feel like I actually have Ingram in a lot of places because he always is just a value. Like he never went in, like he's never drafted top side of the top 7 like tight ends anywhere it was. Even like in Dynasty, I acquired him pretty cheap but if I wasn't getting one of the top like 3-4 guys, now you can put Laporta in there. But if I wasn't getting one of those elite guys, I was like, I'm just getting Ingram and like knowing I'm going to be good there. So I agree. I think it's only for me. It's like I always I thought he was solid, but I just have such stronger confidence in him now. I think seeing that volume. But with that, we're going to move into some of our league updates because finally the floodgates opened in the trade market, boys. We were just holding and just took to the midpoint of the season for some trades that happened. And honestly, thanks to Scotty. Scotty basically made it all happen. We had 4 trades, and the first 3 coming from Mr. Rapizzotti over here. But we'll talk about the first one. Kind of a minor trade. It was Scott acquired Joshua Dobbs, quarterback of the Arizona Cardinals, and he gave up. And I didn't realize it was a 2026 until I was looking at this doc, but a second-round pick in 2026, or a few years out. Scott needed a quarterback for the week, so he traded and got one. No real like fireworks here, but I don't know if you guys have any thoughts there. Not much to really say. It was just got a stopgap quarterback, Phil.
Yeah, I mean, Dobbs has been great as a stopgap quarterback, and Kyler Murray is supposed to come back, but I don't know. I feel like there's still question marks there on what's going to happen with Murray, and I mean, he gave up a 2026 pick.
Yeah, there's re-injury risk, and with Murray, and yeah, I mean, you have a couple of years to figure out what you're going to do about your 2026 second round pick, right? Like you have 2 full seasons to try and make any number of other trades where you get somebody to throw in a 2026 second to balance the scales, and all of a sudden you're right back into the second round. So I view that as a good move, and got to get a starting quarterback out there. So,
I mean, these are low value assets all around. So this isn't really having a major impact, but it filled a need at the time. Moving on to trade number 2, which we alluded to before, I acquired Jerry Jeudy, and I gave up Odell Beckham, Logan Thomas, and Malik Willis. I was involved in it, so I'll let you guys speak more to it.
Yeah, so I think it's a good opportunity to grab another depth piece at quarterback for Scott. I like the idea of adding Logan Thomas, who in a tight end premium league, Logan Thomas, he's been really solid. I think he's like a top 10. I think he actually is like the tight end, like, I don't know, somewhere in like the 10 to 12 range.
Mm-hmm.
He's been pretty good. And yeah, I mean, as somebody who was optimistic about Jerry Jeudy coming into the season, I no longer have that same level of optimism. I think his opportunity to be an elite player in the league is probably past, because if he was going to be elite, then you'd be noticing it right now, right? Like Garrett Wilson is elite, and he's playing he's got an absolute dog shit quarterback throwing him the ball, and you know that he's elite, right? So somebody said it. One of you guys said it earlier, right? Like Cortland Sutton is
he has 5
significantly
touchdowns.
outproduced. Significantly outproducing Judy. So I think Judy's kind of done, and I like the move for both sides though, because I think if Judy ends up getting traded in the offseason, which is very, very likely to happen, and ends up in a new team, you can trade him on the promise of fresh start.
Yeah,
and
even though hype, baby.
Yeah, I mean, it's a guarantee. Just watch, he'll go to somebody like Buffalo or Miami or something, and maybe he'll have a decent career.
Or the Chiefs. Watch him go to the Chiefs.
Yeah, well, if you went to the Chiefs, I think
I'd probably hold him.
you would be the one with the hype for him then.
Oh man, it's great.
But yeah, I mean, we obviously heard your side of it and your reasoning for doing it, but I love it from Scott's side too. I think, he's not going to get much out of Jerry Jeudy this year, and he got 3 guys that he could at least do something with, and I think Logan Thomas is probably the most valuable one. He's been having a great year in tight end premium league. He can throw him into his lineup right now, and should help him this year.
We earlier last week we were talking about a larger deal that had Logan Thomas that he really wanted as well. So I realized that bigger deal wasn't happening anymore, and like I couldn't get the assets to like level it out. But then he was asking me about Jared Jeudy. I'm like, all right, like we can probably I can see a path for this working out for both of us. So I was happy to get that deal done. But moving to trade 3, he did this at the same time. He was working 2 parties at once. He made a second deal, or I should say a third deal with Schluter as well at the same time. And I look at all these deals to kind of together, and I love what he did. But he ended up acquiring Kirk Cousins and a 2024 second, and he traded away James Conner, Quentin Johnson, and I think was it 2024 first? It might have been 2025 first. It might have been a future first. But he traded away a first as well. I personally love this because, as we mentioned, Scott needed to solve the quarterback situation. He's kind of had a lot of patchwork quarterback solves, and now he's got like a solid option this year, and Kirk is going to play next year and a couple years after that. And he's been a great quarterback so far, and he didn't, in my opinion, give up too much. Like he got a second round pick this year back. James Conner, he's hurt. We'll see if the team kind of stinks, but Scott's loaded at running back, so he's not going to be missing James Conner. And QJ, I think is overrated, and it's not really going to be much. He hasn't really shown too much excitement so far at the NFL level. If you don't start showing it your rookie year, you're never really going to ascend to that. So to get a quarterback who I think could be top 10 for the year this year and still be solid in future years and solve that problem without giving any of his core lineup, which is already stacked, I think this was a great move for Scott.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think we talked about it last week. Scott just needed a quarterback, and the rest of his lineup is real solid. So he gets to throw Kirk Cousins in there now, who is probably a top 10 fantasy QB this season. And like you said, he's old, but he's not going anywhere. He could have a couple of seasons left. Who knows? So really only downgraded from a first-round pick to a second-round pick, even if the years are different, and gave up 2 guys that I'm with you. I don't value super, super high right now. So I like the move, and I think Scott's team gets a lot tougher with Kirk Cousins at the helm.
Much fewer holes now when you're playing them.
Yep, I agree. I'll just echo what you said about QJ. I think the Ballers had a whole conversation about the concerns about the opportunity that he's having this season relative to how much he's actually taking advantage of that opportunity. And it's like, like you said, right? Like rookie wide receivers who are given a great opportunity and don't really take advantage of it or flash at all. There are some that, in year 2 or year 3 will kind of pop up out of nowhere, but it's certainly not the likely outcome at this point. So I think taking advantage of the asset there now, and like Ride Dog, you said, just basically moving back from first to second round to add a quarterback who should play for a number of more years in the Superflex League was a good move.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of it. I mean, also with Quinn Johnson, like he was one of the higher drafted rookies, but here are the list of rookies who are doing better than him and seizing opportunities. You got Puka that we talked about, Jordan Addison, Zay Flowers, Josh Downs, Rasheed Rice, Michael Wilson, Tank Dell, was it Jaden Reed, Marvin Mims, JSN, even Demario Douglas, Bobo,
Marvin Mims on like 4 catches.
yeah, Trey Palmer, Jalen Hyatt, Wicks, Mingo, Trey Tucker, Davis, Scott, and then I don't even know who Bell is. Ronnie Bell on the court. Like these guys all have more points in bigger weeks than QJ.
Go
and
blue,
like some of those,
Ronnie Bell.
some of these names are huge, but you're talking about like at least 10 guys. I personally would rather have in Dynasty than Quentin Johnson.
Yeah.
So I thought it was a great move, but and getting out there. And again, Scott. So I know a little bit behind the scenes, Scott. A lot of people were going after Breece Hall. That was the asset everyone wanted, especially when it came to trading a quarterback involved. He very, very smart. He was steadfast. It wasn't happening. You're not getting Breece Hall, which was definitely the right move. And the fact that you got to keep him and still solve his quarterback position, I'm very impressed and thought it was a great move there. Yeah, you're not trading Breece Hall. I fully get that. And then to the last trade, Matt Brzezinski acquired Tony Pollard from Chris Canellis, and he gave up a 2024 first and 2025 second, which to me, that's exactly the value in picks that I probably would have expected for Pollard there. So not too much involved, but just Matt's already epic. Like he has too many running backs. That's my biggest concern. Like he has too many strong running backs and spread the wealth.
Yeah, I just got to correct you there, though. It's Dan Rosinski, not Matt.
Oh, you're right. You're right. Dan manages the team.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, I don't know why Matt's collecting running backs, but I think if you just look at the trade in a vacuum, pretty fair.
Yeah, I would agree. In fact, I saw it and I was honestly a little bit jealous of the Canelo side because capitalizing on an asset like Pollard and getting an early first and getting a first and a second is solid return there. I mean, Pollard, are we sure Pollard's that good? Like he's kind of one of those guys who was hyped up and behind Zeke for years, and then last year he got his opportunity, looked explosive, really looked the part, was running well, was catching a lot of passes. This year has not really run that well. I mean, he's involved in the passing game, but he's like kind of shit from just like between the tackles running. So there's a lot of season left, obviously, and they're throwing it to him quite a bit in the passing game, and he's had some good games against weaker defenses rushing, but I think that's a good move. And I know that there are some other running backs out there that in the league that I'm waiting to see if they move. I know Harry and DaCosta are trying to shed Jacobs, but I actually think Jacobs for me personally, I'd rather have Jacobs than Pollard for the rest of this season. I don't know about Dynasty, but for this season, I think rest of season I would water bet Jacobs to score more fantasy points than Pollard. So there's definitely some, hopefully some more dominoes left to fall, and I'll be looking to make some moves too, as my team fell to 2-5 this year, and I'm definitively slipping into 2024 mode.
Yeah, honestly, I think Pollard and Jacobs will be closer than you think. Jacobs has not looked good either at all this year, but to the Pollard point, Pollard has averaged basically over 5 yards a carry his entire career, and this year he's at 3.85. So the efficiency has not been there for Pollard, which is definitely part of the issue. But who knows? Maybe coming out of the bye, they'll bounce back. But also, David Montgomery, who is the best running back of all the running backs available, is available. I'm in like a weird limbo where like I feel like I should sell, but my record has me kind of in the mix, but I just don't see a path forward to making the playoffs. Like, I don't know, we'll see.
That's what I was saying on the last podcast. I feel like you're in tank mode, but you have a winning record, and you're just like.
But it was a facade. We all know it's a facade. I have the second lowest points scored in the league.
Hey, we always say though, all you gotta do is make the playoffs.
I know, but my whole team's hurt. I just can't. I don't think I think I'm going to lose too many games before my team gets healthy to be in the playoffs, which is why I'm like, let's just lose more. But Monty also, I think, will be good in like a year, for the next like couple of years too. So it's a weird one. He's not young, but he's not old. But those are the trades. Happy to see them finally go down. Hopefully we see a couple more now that people are getting antsy and we kind of broke the ice a little bit. But giving a quick update on the high and low scores. Low score was Harry and Dan this week. We had, 85.16. Still not coming close to the week 1 record of the Wilkinson Bros. Still 6-0, so holding on strong.
Not looking great. I was hoping someone would be a little closer here soon.
We're at the midpoint, Rye. You have 7 more weeks, so we'll see.
Once my fire sale happens, then I'll be a contender for that.
Yeah, that's what you need. You need someone to just like fully outsell. Like,
yeah. That and bye weeks, bye weeks. I don't know. We'll see. If someone sells bye weeks, it could happen.
I mean, last week was the biggest bye week of the year. So
and there's no buys this week.
There's no buys this week, so I don't know.
We're in trouble.
And then for the high, it was actually Mike Caffer and Mike Williams for a new record. This is now the score to beat, 192.46. So congrats to them for breaking the record and holding it down. So we'll see if anyone can top it in the final 7 weeks. But that being said, any future matchup? Obviously, we got Jets-Giants this week. Not something I'd say I look forward to because both teams are poo-poo. But we will definitely be following that game. I'm sure there's a lot of Jets and Giants fans in our league, so that'll be a nice little rivalry. But it'll be interesting to see, I guess, how if Daniel Jones plays, if he's actually better than Tyrod after what he's been doing. But I don't know if there's anything else you guys are looking forward to or any matchups in our league that you're keeping an eye
on. Not a ton. As my focus has slightly shifted a little bit towards 2024, as one of the I think I'm the third from the bottom. I face Team Canolas.
You call that third worst.
Yeah, I face. That would be correct. I face Team Canolas this year, who is in the actual basement, and it'll be interesting to see. I think if he takes me down, then that might put me into pole position for the 101. So let the tank season begin, boys.
And I was looking at actually Scott's team facing off against Adam's team, just because I feel like Adam just keeps slipping by with wins. He has the best record, but he's almost like the Falcons. He just wins, even though I feel like he shouldn't win every week. And Scott's team now got a lot better. So even though he's 2-5, I'm curious to see if he can take down Adam there. And then in terms of real football, Thursday night, we got the Bills. I'm excited to watch the Bills. I feel like they're so kind of hit or miss almost that like playing the Bucs, I think they're favored by like 9. I feel like it's still going to be a really close game.
Yeah, I'm hoping it's a get-right game. They need one because that offense has been sputtering lately. But yeah. We'll see. Thursday night games can throw like kind of curveballs at you, so see if it screws them up a little.
Yeah, Josh Allen, he's still been a top fantasy quarterback, but it's like the first half you're like panicking because he doesn't have anything.
He looks bad. I have him in a redraft, and he looks so bad for 75% of the game. And then the last quarter, he just like scores multiple touchdowns, and he ends up, I think it was like QB4 or something this week. He looked horrible. It was a horrible game.
Literally, it's the last 2 games. He just scores all his points in the fourth quarter. It's crazy.
Love it. Yeah. He's great to own. You do get anxious when you look at the end of the week. You're like, yeah, it was actually okay. Not bad. All right. But with that, thank you guys for listening again. Good luck in all your fantasy matchups, and cheers to week 8 of the NFL season. Have a good one on the NSFW Dynasty podcast.
Take care, guys.
Episode of the NSFW Dynasty podcast. Tune in next time